Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Ichigo Awakens in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 26, Conspiracy Revealed. Sokyoku Hill. Ichigo watched the tunnel of blades dissolve into hundreds of millions of blade petals, the noble captain not wasting any time on the upstart Ryoka. With a flick of his hands, Byakuya Kukaki commanded his torrents of flower petal blades into a fast-moving stream to the hybrid. The only look in the man's eyes was cold anger, anger at the disrespect of the law, anger at the failure of his promise to his late wife, the betrayal of his lieutenant, and above all this one upstart commoner who dared to spit in the face of hundreds of years of tradition. Wow, he is mad. Ichigo thought as he flash-stepped around the chosen battlefield, feeling the fury in the captain's attacks. All this was to buy time for someone, anyone, to find and reveal Aizen's plot. So for now, he focused on dodging and blocking the torrents of blades coming at him from practically every angle. Blasts of Kido and Reishi, blocking with the broadside of his blade, just plain evasion, all to prevent the noble across from him landing a hit. Byakuya waving his arm like he was conducting an orchestra of death against the single opponent he has. I was expecting a bit more after the first time we met, Ichigo Kurosaki. Byakuya said, a cold edge lining his words. If this is all you can muster, then you should never have come to Soul Society. He swung his arms again, the stream of petals coming down on Ichigo's head and another small one from behind. How is the law more important than your sister's life? He yelled out, blocking the above attack with his blade while feeling the attack from behind tearing into his side. He grunted in pain but stood his ground. I think even your parents would say something is wrong with all this. Someone like you would never understand the weight I bear. Byakuya moved his blades in formation for one of his signature abilities. The weight of a noble and a captain. He said as all the blade petals surrounded Ichigo, trapping him in a swirling sphere of death. Though, as much as I hate you for failing Rukia, you do have my thanks. For a time, I had hope. Hope that she would be saved. But the law is greater than the life of one noble. Gokiai, Senbonzakura Kage Yoshi. He said, making the sphere implode on the hybrid. Repent for your sins to myself and Rukia in the next life, Ichigo Kurosaki. He watched his attack strike true, and was immediately blasted away by an intense force of Ryotsu. Do you know how long I've been preparing for this? I've been trained by and with 9 captain-level people, masters of Shunpo, Hakudo, Kido, and Zanjutsu. He heard Ichigo say from a swirling black vortex with a blue and red glow. For the past 6 years of my life, I, the heir of the Kurosaki clan of the living world and son of the Shiba clan of Soul Society, have trained to the limits of my body and pushed beyond. My blades are the power that will cleave the heavens and tear them asunder. He watched as the hybrid stood up, his torn clothes revealing 1,000 fading gashes as they healed. I don't give a damn about laws and traditions. I've trained for one reason. He pointed his massive kyber blade at the shocked captain. You are just a stepping stone to my end goal, Byakuya Kukaki. This fight is one you cannot win. I swore to kill you. Byakuya forced out, refusing to be intimidated. For the sake of my pride, and the protection of Soul Society. Senkei, Senbonzakura Kage Yoshi. He said, surrounding the both of them with thousands of glowing pink swords in the form of his blade. I have only shown this to one other person. One that I swore to kill with my own hands. You forced my hand, boy. Feel the weight of the Soul Society. He said, summoning a blade to his hand. Okay. Ichigo said, surveying his surroundings. Then I'll try this. He threw his lone blade into the air and swung his hand down. With that came a rain of dozens of different variations of his sword. Mayonaka no ha. He said, standing in the middle of his blades. Is this the power of your Zanpakuto? Byakuya asked, feeling insulted by the display. Summoning more of your blade? You think that Shikai can measure to my Bankai? I absolutely can. Ichigo said, grabbing a sawtooth blade. I'd say more, but there are spoilers involved. He charged to meet the noble, releasing a loud clang. With Swafon and Yoryuki. Their clash continued, a fierce exchange of punches and kicks, knees and elbows, palms, and chops. Yoryuki could tell that her former protege was skilled enough to match her, just barely, but she was distracted. Tatsuki, she thought of the one person that could have done anything to rattle her old student. You've overstepped your boundaries with this. She continued to defend against Swafon's attacks, the smallest of tears dripping from her eyes as memories and words from now and long ago echo in her mind. Put your life on the line to serve her. The memories rang out with every attack she made. Some hitting true, some missing. Just call me whatever you want. Each one, slowly cracking that shell of hate she built for the past century. I had you moved here because you have potential. Her father, Yoriyuki, Tatsuki, and herself. She left you behind because she didn't want you to become a criminal for her sake. I worshipped her. She loosed out a scream of fury as she unleashed the technique she made, reserved solely for this fight with her fallen mentor. Look at me now, Yoriyuki. She yelled out, the swirling vortex of Kido power radiating from her. This is the new technique I invented just for this. Yoriyuki watched in shock at her disciple's foolish action. Swafon, stop. She yelled out in concern. Your Shunko is unstable. You can't maintain dash. Look at how strong I've become. Swafon said, her voice cracking. I'm strong now, right? She began to tremble as her emotional defenses finally fell. I've met your expectations now, haven't I? She dropped to her knees and Yoriyuki went to her crying disciple to dispel the dangerous technique. I. She stammered before feeling her mentor wrap her arms around her shaking form. You've gotten so strong while I was gone. She said, pride evident in her voice. You were the only one I could count on to take over after I left. Swafon brought her shaking arms around her mistress. I'm so proud of you. Yoriyuki said, making her disciple cry again. In relief and joy. Yoriyuki was still her much-beloved mistress. Somewhere in Siriti. The rest of the gang were running around, trying to meet at the agreed-on rallying point. Ikeko led Tatsuki, Yumichika, and Hanataro helped Orium stay focused, Chad and Urayu had directions from their captors, and Ganju followed Urayu. After a few minutes of running, they finally caught up with each other. All right, everyone listen up. Urayu said, taking charge of the group. Yukatake told me that Rukia is coming our way. We need to figure out who's getting her out of here and who's backing up Ichigo. We'll get Rukia out of here. Tatsuki said, gesturing to herself and Orium. You two have more battle experience and have fought alongside him longer. We'll leave our Ichigo in your trustworthy hands. Orium said with a smile. She brightened up further when she saw their objective. Rukia. She called as Renji continued to carry her. Just then, a bleeding Tuan appeared in front of them and pulled out a length of cloth that spun around the three before vanishing in a flash of light. That's not good. Urayu stated, feeling three strong presences showing up where Ichigo was. His eyes, drifting to the glove on his right hand. Attention everyone. They heard a voice in their minds. Kenpeka vs Komamura. The Wolfman continued his barrage in vain. No matter what he did, Zaraki was just stronger and seemed to grow more so as the fight went on. The scarred man grunted in annoyance as the giant puppet kept bringing down his strikes that he just kept deflecting. Eventually he grabbed onto the massive blade and tore it out of the giant's hand, with Komamura reflecting what happened. How did someone like you ever become a captain? Kenpeka groaned, not feeling any benefit from this battle. You don't even make for a decent warm-up. He said just as a voice called out to everyone. Captain Aizen is alive. They heard the ethereal voice that would condemn who was thought to be a dead man. And there's the confirmation. Zaraki said, completely apathetic to the situation. Tuan's a traitor. He looked over to Komamura who seemed to be in shock and denial. Let's go. He told the Wolfman. The old man issued their deaths if they were found as traitors. Komamura took a few more seconds before he rose up, dispelling his bankai. Very well. He disbelief switching out for righteous fury. Earlier at the C-46 chambers. He was blind to the world around him, focusing only on the sight ahead. He had broken through the barrier that separated the outside from the 46 officials that made up the main governing body of the Soul Society, and found only corpses. Aizen is suspected of treason. The words of the ancient commander echoed in his mind. If there is evidence that supports this at the Central 46, then Captains Aizen, Ichimaru, and Tuan are to be found and killed on sight. Who could have done this? He heard his lieutenant ask, managing to stay composed. Captain? She asked in concern, shaking him. Aizen's alive. He barely managed to whisper. One of the most gentle, charming, wise, and trustworthy captains had manipulated everyone this whole time. He's deeper inside, he said, trying to make any rational sense out of everything. If they were paying any attention, they would have noticed Hinamori at the entrance and Jin on the other side, beckoning her closer, silently. Captain, what are you talking about? She asked, desperate to understand what was going on. Ichigo told the head captain that Aizen was planning to betray Soul Society. He admitted, shocking his lieutenant. Jin and Tuan are his co-conspirators, they have been for centuries. He left Momo, his closest friend, in the care of a man trying to destroy Soul Society for decades. He looked to the only other entrance, deeper into the council chambers. I need to see this. I need to see with my own eyes that Aizen is alive. He made his way inside, deeper into the forbidden sections of the building. His pace increased as he went deeper and deeper, hearing his childhood friend in a man he still wanted to think was dead. He reached them, seeing them embrace each other, with a dark look in Aizen's eyes. He shunpoed his way to them and ripped Hinamori from the traitorous man's arms, and felt cold steel pierce his back. Quite the troublemaker, aren't you, Hichugiya? Aizen said. Toshiro looked to see Jin smiling that sadistic smile at him. Toshiro? Momo asked as Rangiku pulled her away. What's happening? Captain Aizen dash. Rangiku. Hichugiya yelled out, coughing up blood. Get Momo out of here and send the message. Aizen is a tray AHH. He ordered as Jin ripped the blade out of him. Rangiku attempted to run before getting bound. Bakudo number 61, Rikuya Koro. Aizen calmly chanted, trapping all three. I was hoping to kill her quickly. A last courtesy to her. So easy to manipulate. Momo was in shock, everything she was trying to deny anything but the kind gentle captain she adored. But still useless. I was expecting her to try harder and die by Ichigo's hands. Ruin more of his credibility. Instead he made it to Yamamoto. And told us everything. Another voice said as Anohana revealed herself, making Jin jump back to Aizen. I thought something was off with your fake body. But when I showed the Ryoka, they saw nothing. One of them even dispelled the illusion. Quite the dangerous Zapakuto you have. She said as Toshiro slowly pushed himself up. I'd suggest running while you have the chance. Tuan wasn't nearly a match for Zaraki, and Yamamoto's waiting for my lieutenant to signal everyone. She reached her hand to her braid and released it, letting her hair slowly unravel. Unless you'd like to gamble on a fight against me. Aizen glared at the captain and felt a sense of fear he hadn't had in a long time. Jin activated their escape spell, just in time to hear Aizen preparing her broadcast. Sokioka Hill. Byakuya was forced on the defensive as Ichigo's unpredictable style assaulted him. Ichigo was practically seamless, switching between blades and styles with ease. Every blade made him alter his fighting in the smallest way and didn't slow him down in the slightest. Different types of serrated blades to tear away Byakuya's guard and slash him deeply, hooked blades to put him in an extended grab and slam him against the ground, slim for speed, wide for defense and power. Byakuya couldn't get close when Ichigo started summoning blades to his hand much like he did and started swinging them by the cloth like a demented dance. Ichigo spent the past 3 days adapting to his 100 different blades and now it shone. Byakuya was only making do with his slightly greater speed and years of experience. After 10 minutes, Byakuya noticed something was off. I thought your intention was to defeat me, he said, managing to flash step into Ichigo's guard and impale his foot. Is this the extent of your abilities? He asked while placing a finger against Ichigo's shoulder. No, but you never know who's watching. Ichigo said, matching Byakuya's actions but on the side of his abdomen. Heido number 4, Byakurai. They said simultaneously, Byakuya blowing a hole through Ichigo's while he did the same elsewhere on the noble's body. Besides, I'm not trying to kill you. Ichigo grunted, stumbling back as his body healed from the attack. "Just buying time," he said before delivering a strong blow to Byakuya's wound. "Every heard of the idea, to fool your enemies you must fool your friends?" he asked as Byakuya dropped to his knees. "Do you really think I would have survived against the Captain Commander if he was really trying to kill me?" he asked, making Byakuya's eyes widen in realization. The excessive punishment Rukia was sentenced to, the aggressive attack made against Ichigo, and the fact that he survived the head captain's wrath. "There's a conspiracy," he whispered, dispelling his Senkai just as Aizen and his allies appeared with Rukia and Renji in tow. "You are too much of a threat to my ambitions, Ichigo Kurosaki," Aizen said, just as the message was being broadcasted. "Aizen is alive and guilty of high treason. Orders as dictated by head Captain Yamamoto are to kill traitors Aizen, Ichimaru, and Tuan on sight. A shame you couldn't join me. But at the rate you are growing, you'll become too much of a risk." He looked to his two subordinates. "Kill him," he said before proceeding to cut off Renji's sword arm. "Byakuya! Back up!" Ichigo yelled, charging forward to the two captains. Byakuya, fighting against the pain in his torso, made his millions of blade petals move to his new ally's aid. Tuan created a barrage of blades with his Suzumushi while Jin shot his Shinso towards Ichigo. He was able to stop the barrage, but Shinso pierced through the defensive barrier and speared into Ichigo, only for him to power through after stumbling for a second. "Getsuga Tenshou!" Ichigo roared, spinning himself and tearing the blade through his body, and swung both great blades in his hands down, unleashing two massive waves of power. The attacks were blocked by a pair Danku barriers. While their sight was obscured by the smoke and Reishi waves still fighting the barriers, Ichigo flash-stepped behind the barriers and delivered a deep slash to his opponents. Across Tuan's stomach and on Jin's arm. Ichigo continued toward his target, but it was too late. Aizen had Renji armless and bleeding out while tearing out a jeweled sphere from Rukia's chest with a weird ritual. "I was surprised when you displayed hollow abilities and your own amazing growth, Ichigo," Aizen said, looking over the orb in his hand. "Out of all the experiments I have made in hollowification, you are the only real success," he said, throwing the weakened girl away. Ichigo, in his shock and anger at seeing his friend in such a state, left himself open as he was impaled from behind, Jin and Tuan pinning him to the ground. Byakuya took his lieutenant and sister away in the confusion, his own feelings getting in the way of his sense of duty, but there wasn't much he could do. All he could do was pull them out of the way. "But this was all as I predicted, even you telling Yamamoto. The word of exiles and traitors is poor evidence for the accusations you must have made." Aizen rose his blade. "You could have been the only one to equal me." "Ashamed," he almost said before a massive blue bolt struck him and sent him back. Jin and Tuan were then punched in the face by two giant fists, sending them next to Aizen. "Sorry about being late," Uriah said as Chad helped his friend back up, pulling out the lodged blades in his friend's back. "I had to carry Chad." "It's fine," Ichigo said, his wounds slowly closing up as the damage started to get to him. "Thanks for the assist." He noticed the growing barrier around them. "Urahara's idea," Chad said, pointing at a few stakes around them. "No escape, no sound, or sight into the barrier." "All right," Ichigo said, standing upright and creating more of his blades while his veins glowed and his body was covered in the white armored shell of his hollow power. "I feel better with you two at my back," he said, finally noticing the new outfit of armor and the wing of Reishi at his shoulder. "It was this or I let you die," Uriah said, knowing what Ichigo was going to say. "What's done is done and I'm not losing any more family. You can be so stubborn." Ichigo growled in annoyance, but smiled anyway. "I'd do the same thing." They all shared a smirk as the two sides charged at each other. Chapter 27, The Prelude to Change. Outside the barrier. The announcement went out to the whole of Siriti as the able captains and lieutenants congregated on the execution hill. All of them, standing around a shining white pyramid with 6 sides that held the traitors and the Ryoka that elected to fight them. Some were calm, waiting patiently for their chance to jump in and either apprehend the traitors or save their new allies. Others were antsy, on edge, furious at the betrayal of who they thought they could trust. "Be ready, all of you," Yamamoto said while his soldiers released their shikai, a few even calling out their bankai. Zaraki removed his eye patch and grasped his blade with both hands, a focused look making the wild berserker almost unrecognizable. Kurosaki and two of his allies have trapped the traitors inside. Hope for the best, but be ready for the worst. Inside the barrier, Chad vs Tuan. Ichigo and Aizen clashed against each other, each side no longer holding back as they tried to kill each other. Ichigo couldn't really hope to match someone that mastered every aspect of Shinigami combat and had to rely heavily on his strength and defense augmentation abilities, to come close to even with the power-hunger madman. Their clashes rang like thunder as the ground fractured beneath them. Urayu and Jin were exchanging thrusts and shots as the two danced around each other with constant jumps from one place to the next until Urayu trapped him in a barrage of arrows that left Jin to only block and dodge as best he could. Tuan, already in bad condition, tried his best to keep Chad at bay. Suzumushi Nishiki, Benihiko. He called out, focusing all of the generated blades at his charging opponent. Dozens upon dozens of spearing blades shot at Sato as he continued his charge. He brought his powered right arm up to block the onslaught of blades, managing to deflect some but still getting many blades cutting and stabbing into him. Suddenly his arm flared with his Reishi as he punched the ground toward the blind man. The explosion fired a barrage of stone and dust at the blind Shinigami, making him stagger as Chad closed in on him. He attempted to slash at the man but he caught it in an iron grip, leaving him to resort to punches and kicks which grew weaker and weaker as he lost more blood. "I honestly don't want to fight you," Chad said, after the blows became less and less effective against him. "You look like you're 1 foot in the grave already and I feel like the bad guy for this." He lifted Tuan up to look into his blank white eyes. "But you've made yourself my enemy when you attacked my friend," he said with a glare before clenching his left fist. "So, for both of us, stay down." He then punched Tuan directly at the epicenter of his injuries and sent him flying back. He turned to his friends fighting, trying to decide who to help. Urayu vs Jin. "Just how fast is this guy?" Urayu screamed in his head as Jin kept up with his barrage of thousands of arrows, blocking and dodging every one. The loud zipping of the constant releasing of his bolts mixed with the clang and thud of every arrow drowned out all else, leaving him open as Jin chanted his spell. "Carriage of thunder, bridge of a spinning wheel. With light, divide this into 6. Bakudo number 61, Rikyu Koro." Jin chanted, trapping Urayu in the binding of the spell. "Too bad for poor Ichigo," he taunted, ending up behind Urayu with his blade at the archer's neck. "Captain Aizen is still too strong for him. His Ryutsu is too dense and great." Urayu spared a glance at his cousin and the schemer he fought. To most people it was even, but Urayu could tell it was starting to wear on the hybrid. Getting slightly slower in all aspects, most concerning was his regeneration. "Damn it!" Urayu cursed in his head. "I can't move. Wait. Kido is Reishi-based, and Aizen's Ryutsu is enough to repel Ichigo. I've got it." He slowly used his Ranso Tenge to manipulate the Reishi around him to weaken the Kido spell and pull out a Black Seal Schneider. "I knew this would come in handy," he thought before extending the black Reishi blade that almost stabbed through Jin's chest and head, forcing him to jump back. Urayu turned, breaking through the Kido, grabbed the black rod making its blade vibrate faster, and charged at the fox man. Jin jumped back to avoid the slash and felt a looming shadow overhead. "El Directo!" Chad roared, firing an intense blast at the silver-haired devil, making him plummet to the ground. When he landed, he went over to his ally. "Urayu, go. I'll handle this," Chad tried to say before feeling a cut in his right shoulder. "You should never turn your back on an opponent," Jin said cold and threateningly. The two glared at him before charging, Chad going for the direct approach while Urayu circled them. He's the enemy, Chad thought. He's siding with Aizen, someone Ichigo swore to kill. He was closing the distance between them faster and faster. Ichigo's putting his life and principles on the line to do what needs to be done. He fired a Reishi blast at Jin, point blank, who deflected it with a wave of his hand. "I am his friend and I will match his resolve." He let out a roar as he slammed his left fist into Jin's stomach. There was a shock wave from underneath them and a blast of air and light from Jin's back, making him cough up bile and blood from the unexpected attack. He flew back as Chad got ready for the next assault, his left arm coated in white with a single red line going down it. This should do it, Uriah thought, gathering the energy from Chad's blast to further augment his own power. He aimed at the back of Aizen's head and fired the Seal Schneider. Ichigo vs Aizen. The two locked blades, fighting for dominance, as the battles around them continue. They heard a loud whistle as Uriah unleashed the massive bolt. As it closed in on the two combatants, Aizen swiftly moved aside at the last second. Ichigo leaned back, the energy and edge of the blade cutting into his skin slightly, reached out, and took hold of it. The energy mixed with the reishi he poured into it, seemingly catching fire and becoming unstable, as he brought the blade down on Aizen. He managed to block, but the combined, unstable power tore through the sword and left a deep gash through Aizen's chest. Hado #88. Ichigo yelled out, holding an arm out and bracing it, preparing to use the powerful spell. Bakudo number 81. Danku. Aizen responded, setting up the clear wall to repel the attack. Ichigo disappeared from his sight as the hybrid skirted around the wall. He turned just in time to see the ball of cackling red energy in Ichigo's hand. He tricked me. Zero. Ichigo yelled, slamming the energy into Aizen's chest and firing it point blank. The explosion and recoil blasted him away as he tumbled on the ground. He slowly pulled himself to his feet and saw Chad and Uriah struggling against Jin, who was moving much faster. He summoned up his own black bow and readied to take a shot, his vision getting hazier by the second, until he felt a blade through his side. His strength left him as he turned to look into Aizen's cold glare, looking no worse than when they started, aside from the laceration and burned body with his Shikakusho and Haori burned away. My patience with this has ended, he said coldly, ripping the blade from his sword through Ichigo's chest, slashing through his heart and lungs and removing most of his right arm. Tuan, tossed aside and forgotten, used his chance to destroy some of the metal stakes that held the Kido barrier they were trapped in. Aizen was about to kill Ichigo before Kenpeka came in through the newly made opening and nearly cut off Aizen's hand. Now! Tuan yelled, prompting both Aizen and Jin to cover their ears. Cry! Suzumushi! The high-pitched ring emanated from his blade, shaking most of the gathered captains and lieutenants, which was more than enough time as beams of pale light surrounded the conspirators. Aizen took the chance to look around, sure there was another diversion he had ready, only to find the three gatekeepers he had under his command already beaten and unconscious. Kyokaku and Jidanbo's presence telling him all he needed. Well, this ended messy than I would have liked, he said within the barrier that the now revealed hollows made for him. But no matter. Try as you may, I will be the one to stand at the top of everything. He removed his glasses and slicked his hair back, while Komamura yelled after Tuan, demanding what justice he's following. Ichigo! Uriah called out, barely conscious as he cradled his cousin. Ichigo, stay with me. Anohana already made her way to the hybrid along with Orium, trying desperately to heal him, but the shock of seeing Ichigo on death's door shook her being and damaged her focus. All Ichigo could think of was the feeling of defeat. I failed. No matter what, he was always able to persevere, push himself beyond. But now? Aizen has the Hogyaku, he was defeated, they had the chance to stop a threat and focus on Waiwaka's uprising, and now he laid here, feeling his life fade. No. No. He thought defiantly. I will not lay down and die. I will beat you. Aizen. Ichigo roared out, holding the stump of his right arm up as a grey mass swelled and exploded from his arm. The giant worm-like appendage rose toward Aizen and the mass of Jillians, opening a disgusting maw and unleashing 1,000 other mouthy tendrils that bashed feebly against the barrier and devouring what Minos they got their hungry mouths on. This continued until Aizen and his allies disappeared, leaving behind a swarm of hollows to be devoured by Ichigo's monstrous arm. When all the hollows were gone, Ichigo's arm returned to normal as his body healed completely, now unconscious from exhaustion. Everyone looked on in shock at the young boy, before Yamamoto stepped in. He did tell me that Aizen was experimenting with hollowification, he said as he made his way over to the sleeping hybrid. He must have been the result of one of those experiments. He'll have more potential to grow and evolve as a warrior. What we just witnessed was most likely a reaction to the desire to survive and fight. I want him placed in care and under guard, he announced to the remaining captains. I will speak with him when he wakes up. Anohana nodded at the orders and summoned the beast form of her Minajiki, directing Chad and Urayu inside it. And if I hear Kurotsuka got anywhere near that boy, there will be hell to pay. The next morning at the Squad 4 barracks. The CRIDI was still reeling from the events of yesterday. The squads of the traitor captains were just barely held together at the seams until being directly commanded by Yamamoto. Thousands of souls recently appeared in Soul Society. Byakuya told Rukia of the truth behind her adoption into the Kukaki clan and begged her forgiveness. Yoriyuki spent the night scolding Tatsuki for telling Swaifon the truth and scolding Swaifon for letting it affect her and get in the way of duty. Urayu got to work fixing and replacing clothing damaged over the course of the invasion with near alarming enthusiasm. Chad went back to placing the remaining tags around CRIDI, and Orium never once left Ichigo's side, praying for his swift recovery while Kenpeki watched over the hybrid like a hawk. Why Kenpeki? Captain Kurotsuki, you know you are not permitted to go near him. Because Mayuri was dead set on studying the boy. Anohana patrolled the hallways while Zaraki was the last line. As noon hit, Ichigo finally raised from his slumber. Ugh. What happened? He asked, thinking some of what happened was a nightmare. Aizen kicked your ass and escaped. Zaraki said bluntly. Your arm exploded into a monstrous hydra thing that ate a couple dozen Minos Grande and you were out cold for the rest of the night. It's noon now and we're still dealing with the fallout. So, pard Haloha. Yeah. Ichigo responded, petting Orium's sleeping head on his lap. I'll explain it all later. I don't care how or why, Ichigo. The scarred man said. My only concern is that you keep your word about our deal. Ichigo thought for a second. Well, if Urahara can be trusted, then my potential is near limitless. I heal from crippling injuries in a near instant, and I've yet to really tap into what I'm capable of. He noticed Zaraki was trembling in excitement. When I get the time, Zaraki. I've got a feeling that I'll be busy for a little while. Kenpeki nodded reluctantly, knowing their rematch was going to have to wait. Ichigo. Orium mumbled as she woke up. She saw her lover awake and alive and proceeded to pull him to her chest, bawling her eyes out about how scared she was. Ichigo was flailing wildly at the lack of oxygen. After finally prying himself free, she looked him square in the face. You need to talk to Rukia. Now. She said, unusually stern for the normally bubbly girl. Okay. He acknowledged, remembering the surprise kiss he gave her. But I do need to check on someone else first. He said, getting up and dressing after Zaraki and Orium left the room, Zaraki dragging her out. He found his new outfit, a sleeveless shiakusho with wild red tribal markings with a white undershirt with a more ordered blue pattern and a 5-pronged manji on the chest, each end tipped with the Shiba clan's symbol, and a facsimile of his hollow mask on top of it, along with a note saying, just try it. Urayu. After dressing himself, he left the room to find his cousin. Ah, Ichigo. He heard a demented skeletal clown man say. So happy to see you finally awake. Would you like to come with Dash? Bala. Ichigo said, not even sparing a glance as he flicked a non-lethal ball of energy at Mayuri's head, sending him flying. Everything around him was muted as he followed the dim weak Ryotsu trace that was now what remained of Urayu's power. Just enough to see spirits. He finally found his cousin as he was sketching a new outfit design. He beamed seeing his cousin. Ichigo. I see you're in the new outfit I made. He said, jumping up and checking the measurements again to make sure everything fit right. I wanted to make something that really spoke about you. Those Shinigami robes are just so bland with each one being practically the same. He was going on and on about the lack of aesthetic with Soul Reaper uniforms before Ichigo stopped him. Urayu. Are you alright? Ichigo asked. Why do you ask? The Quincy responded, his eyes darting away from the hybrid. You always get really into your tailoring hobby when you're depressed. Ichigo bluntly stated. I do not. Urayu scoffed. Pimping out your possessed teddy bear, does that sound familiar? Ichigo said, reminding Urayu of an earlier instance. Hey, Kon looked much better for it. Urayu defended. Urayu, I can see the bags under your eyes. How many sets of clothes did you make? Ichigo pushed. 2, each. The archer admitted. Okay, I see your point. He looked at his now bare hand and the purification cross he wore. I was hoping to do more. To at least get rid of one of them. But now they're gone, they won, and what do I have to show for it? No powers. He said, clenching his fist as tears welled up in his eyes. We were supposed to stand by each other, now I'm useless. He felt Ichigo wrap his arms around him. You saved my life, Urayu. Ichigo said. That's gotta count for something. Urayu returned the hug. We'll figure something out. We've got Ryokan, Urahara, and all the resources of Soul Society. You'll get your powers back. If not, you're still a better tactician than I am. Urayu let out a chuckle. Yeah, okay. Now let go, I don't swing that way. Urayu said, feeling his mood lighten up. Much to the disappointment of many of our female classmates. What do you mean? Ichigo asked as they separated. Never mind, I don't want to know. He got up to leave. I need to find Rukia, any idea where she is? Urayu pondered for a second. Well, I heard she talked to Byakuya. But the better bet is that she went to the Shiba clan. He told her. Got it. See ya. Ichigo said, already planning on making his trip. Wait. Give this to her. Urayu said, pulling out a light blue sundress with a darker blue wave design. I got a little carried away and made her one too. He said, almost embarrassed. Ichigo looked at the clothing Urayu made and back to his cousin. The doctor with his own clothing line. He said, folding the outfit and tucking it away. If it was anyone else, I'd never believe it. Shiba clan. Ichigo made his way through Soul Society, receiving a message from a Hell Butterfly to see the head captain as soon as possible, until he finally made his way back to the current home of his clan. The sun was starting to dip into the horizon when the house came into sight. Kyukaku was stomping on Ganju and ordering him to work harder. I heard you were dead weight and caused everyone trouble. She yelled. If you gave our cousin a bad image of us, I'll be twice as harsh. I don't think it's fair to compare the two of us. Ichigo said, finally interrupting Ganju's torture. I wasn't exactly raised soft, Kyukaku. The clan head made her way down to greet her family with a smile. Nice to see you back, kid. She said, giving his butt a firm hard smack before leaning in and giving him a hug. Heard you did real good out there. And your Yuaki shared some juicy stories between you two. She whispered hotly in his ear, making Ichigo turn into a strawberry. Can't wait for my turn, stud. Ganju. Ichigo said, louder than intended. I heard Rukia was here. Is that right? Yeah. Ganju said, confused about what just happened. She came to apologize. Sis told her to see his shrine to get some closure. I'll show you the way. He said, walking into the underground mansion, Ichigo speeding his way to follow. Damn. Kyukaku said, looking at the palm of her hand. That was a really toned ass. Thank you, Yuaki. With Rukia. She was sitting in front of a wooden shrine, housing flowers, sweet incense, and two pictures. One of a man and the other of a woman, Kyan, and Miyako Shiba, Rukia's idols. She was offering her prayers for their peaceful rest and apologizing for the 1000th time, unaware of the hybrid coming in. So that's Kyan, huh? He said, coming in next to the petite soul reaper. That really is an uncanny resemblance. Yeah, Rukia agreed. He was also hot-headed and acted out of a personal desire to help people, for no other reason than they needed help. You would have liked him, Ichigo. She said, relaxing a little bit. Ichigo smiled at her as she reminisced. Tell me more. He said, prompting her to talk about her first days in her squad. The apathy Kyan showed her as a noble and treated her like a person, the kindness her gave her as she grew into her own as a soul reaper, the day his wife was murdered by a hollow, his fight and possession, and his death by her hands. He saw her tears dripping down, wetting her purple-flowered kimono, the pain from that day resurfacing on her. He pulled her into his lap, without warning, and held her tightly. He doesn't blame you. No one does. You gave him peace, Rukia, now alive on like he wanted you to. If you need a shoulder, I'll be there. he told her. After blinking in shock as his words finally registered, she relented, and let all of her tears pour out into Ichigo's chest. They were trapped in their own world, unaware of a few ladies watching them. "So, we're gonna let her in now, aren't we?" Tatsuki asked, a little annoyed. Her face was bandaged from the sparring she had with Yoriyuki. Though it helped in the long run, it was still a low thing to do to a fellow disciple. Orium was doing her best to hold back the tears. "How can we not, Tatsuki?" she cried in sympathy for their friend. "She went through so much, she needs some good in her life." She wrapped her arms around Tatsuki as she couldn't hold back the tears. Yeah. And she's a pretty nice girl to have around. Plus now there's 2 girls to kick his ass into gear now, she thought, relenting to the idea of allowing Rukia into their club. "We'll talk to her later." Go to I-13 meeting room. Night had fallen, most of the Soul Society was asleep now, resting and recovering from the events from earlier that day. All but the unlucky groups pulling night patrols, the captains that would determine the future of the coming war, and the hybrid that seemed to be at the center of all of it. They all stood in attendance, the captains flanking down both sides, with Genri Yusai at the head and Ichigo in the center. "There are many questions to ask Ichigo," Yamamoto started. "But very little time to get any answers. So for now, only the necessary ones. Are you in complete control?" "My power is mine to wield, sir," Ichigo answered, firm and confident. "We are not at full strength right now, will they return?" Yamamoto asked, referring to the wizards and his mentors. "They are expecting to return," he answered. "How soon can you get them?" Everyone looked at him expectantly. Ichigo wordlessly turned around, reached out, and tore a portal open in the air. "Tomorrow, most likely," he said, having never traveled by his own Garganta consciously before. Sokioka Hill, Spirit Conversion Senkaimon. Everyone gathered at the feudal gateway back into the Danga and to the living world. Ichigo, palming his chest that held the message from Yamamoto to their lost allies. "Though you were initially enemies, you've shown yourselves to be allies to Soul Society," Genri Yusai announced to the gathered Ryoka. "Be wary, for you've also marked yourselves as targets by Aizen. Chances are he'll send spies or assassins, so watch your backs. The coming months may prove trying, but together we are fighting for more than just stability. Be ready for when we call on you, and pray it never comes to that." The old man nodded at Ichigo as they started going through the gate one by one. Before he went through the gate, Rukia came forward. She was wearing the sundress Uriah made and sporting a heavy blush. "What is it?" he asked, just before she slammed her lips against his. "Why, you better take responsibility for taking my first kiss, Ichigo," she stammered before kicking him through the gate. The only thought going through his head was, what just happened? Silburn, the shadows of Sirai. He sat upon his throne, watching from the shadows of his enemy's domain, slowly gathering his power. His cold glare locked on the 2 mixed-blooded Quincy that survived his holy cleansing. Uriah showed loyalty to his friends, but foolish resentment to his true family. Ichigo was one to be wary of. Already proving himself as a potential special power, it was becoming more and more evident that his wayward child needed to be shown the light. "Hashwalth," he spoke to his chosen second. His dark, heavy voice echoing throughout the dark corridors of the royal chambers. "It seems my child of darkness needs some guidance to his true destiny. Go and select a couple of the stern ritters to keep an eye on him. Do the same for Ishida." The blond man bowed in reverence. "As you command, Your Majesty." Chapter 28, Gathering Allies. Karakura Town. The group were making their way out of the Danga, jumping out of the portal between worlds into the dark night of the living world. As the wind tore at them with their ever-increasing descent, they all remained calm. Only one person said anything. "Santon Kes-shun, I reject." Orium whispered as her shielding barrier activated beneath them, giving them an easy landing from their jump. Coincidentally, avoiding whatever it was Urahara had planned as something passed beneath them. "Ah!" They heard the eccentric man groan as they settled down on the glowing barrier. Urahara was next to them on his own flying carpet device. "I was ready to give you all a ride," It's been a long day, Kisuke. Ichigo said, walking to the edge of the barrier. And I'm not done yet. Yamamoto wanted me to gather everyone. Urahara lowered his head in a rare moment of seriousness. Aizen escaped, didn't he? He said, knowing before he asked. The look Ichigo had gave him all the answer he needed. Fine. Have them head to my shop. I'll need to start making plans. His student nodded before jumping off Orium's barrier and charging straight for the wizard's warehouse. Could I get a ride to the hospital? Uriu asked, the truth of his situation already known amongst his friends. My father wanted me to report to him after coming back. I can take you, Uriu. Orium chirped, ready to help her friend. Sara is still supposed to be visiting our aunt, so there shouldn't be anyone home right now. And I live nearby her place, so we'll accompany ya. Tatsuki added while Sato got up from his place and went to the edge. Everything all right, Sato? Uriu asked, feeling a certain tension from the giant. I'm going for a stroll. He said before dropping off the platform, still high above the suburban building of that part of Karakura. I worry about that guy. Uriu said. Soon, the Soul Reaper mentors separated from the spiritually aware humans as they both had their own destinations. So, what did happen with Aizen exactly? Urahara asked his old friend as they flew toward the Shoten. He got to Rukia and removed what you put inside her from that Jigai. Yuruki responded. And then he tried to kill Ichigo. Urahara hummed and thought. That was a risky gamble, but it looks like it paid off. With Chad. Chad took his time getting home, needing to clear his head. Finishing his mission of placing whatever those tags were all around Soul Society was not enough, and his mind was still like a raging storm from the battle at Sokioka Hill. He made a promise. There was one thing about that promise that he absolutely had to do. I'll watch your back and you watch mine. And he couldn't even do that. Ichigo was almost killed when he wasn't there, he was too slow. Ichigo was almost killed when he was there, he was too weak. His powers seemed to be growing every day, but what was the point to them if he couldn't keep his promise? He looked down at his hands, his large, strong fists that helped him for so long, that he used to help others. When he needed them to succeed the most, they failed. He was too weak. Uriu crippled his own power to pick up the slack, and Ichigo almost died because he couldn't help him. Chad never felt so weak, so pathetic, in his entire life. It was a good thing he could keep his stoic facade, because he would be raging at his friends and crying like a child, the last thing they needed. With a single roar of anger, he threw one punch and made a large crater and spiderweb crack in a concrete wall. His right fist didn't even have a scratch on it. That was an impressive display. Came a voice from the darkness. But I doubt punching rocks will help you strengthen your powers. Chad looked around cautiously. Whoever was talking knew about him and his abilities, that put him on edge. If you want to fix that, to train your powers, we can help. A piece of paper fell from above with an apartment keycard and a phone. The card said, "Welcome to our Skyushin." With Ichigo. He moved quickly, flash-stepping as quickly as he could throughout the city to reach his destination. A single warehouse, hidden from sight behind a barrier beyond time and space to anyone unaware of its existence. Ichigo reached the building within the glowing force field and touched it, letting the ripples open a pathway for him to pass through. He went into the building to find each one of the wizards, ready and waiting for him, in the ruined building of the warehouse. You made it back. Shinji said, pleased to see the young hybrid once more. What's the word, kid? Ichigo reached into his jacket to pull out the message from the captain commander. He's happy to know you're all alive, and embarrassed that things got so bad. He said, throwing the folded envelope to the unofficial leader of the wizards. That is an official letter of pardon, personal apologies, and summons back to Soul Society so we can all plan out our next move. Ichigo told him as each of the former captains and lieutenants looked over the paper to confirm the message. Good to know the old man was actually willing to listen. Kensei said as they all dropped down to the ground. Let's go, gang. He said, leading the group as they moved to return to their old home. Hiyori was grumbling about lousy Soul Reapers and stupid Kisuke and other things that pissed her off. She really doesn't play well with anyone, does she? Ichigo asked, watching them all head for Urahara's shop. The only person I remember her actually getting along with was her previous captain, Kiryu Hikaifuan. Shinji explained. I think Anohana copied her in the way she interacted with her squad. Like a mom to a group of kids. Then Kisuke shows up, seems completely lazy and untrustworthy, changes everything about the squad by making the Research and Development Institute and freeing Mayuri from his prison cell. He replaced her mother figure and changed everything about her division, and she didn't like it. What happened to her? The hybrid asked, never hearing much more than necessary about their own pasts. After she invented the Jiken, she was promoted to the Zero Squad and left without a word. The former captain said. The Royal Guard of the Soul King, one of the most elite groups, if not the highest ranking under the Soul King himself. Ichigo was shocked, hearing the news and wondering what kind of beings they must be to personally guard the Soul King. You think Aizen could beat them? Ichigo asked again. Shinji paused as he gave the question serious thought. If Aizen has his way, he'd be unstoppable. As it is now, he's just shy of that. Karakura Hospital, Ryuken's office. He was going over some final papers and reports, documents needed to keep his hospital running, when his personal secretary told him that his son was here to see him. He was clearing out some last-minute necessities to get out of the way. His son returned from battle in Soul Society, most likely powerless. It was the circumstances as to why he removed the Sanrei glove that interested him more than anything else. His child entered the office, looking downcast as could be expected. Father. The boy greeted, some traces of nervousness and defeat evident in his tone. Uryu. Ryuken responded. I see you used the let's still. I had to. Uryu said. There was an uncomfortable silence as Uryu sat down in the middle of his office. Tell me what happened. The stern father ordered. Start from the beginning. After we got out of the Danga. Uryu told him everything. When they infiltrated the Siridi, separated, Orium handling much of the Lesser Soul Reapers, to meeting Mayuri Kuratsuki. He killed grandfather. Him and hundreds of our kind. I won't lie, I wanted to get revenge. He said, looking at the cross hanging from his wrist. I wanted to rip off the glove and destroy him, hit him with all the power I could muster with the let's still. But I couldn't. I couldn't waste my power for revenge when there was nothing to gain from it. His hand dropped limply to his side. Grandfather's dead, dead for good, and I can't focus on something that would just make me feel a little better. I still beat him, but I didn't kill him. Then what made you remove the Sanrei glove? Ryuken asked, a shadow of a smile gracing his lips at his son's judgment. Our enemy, Aizen. He had Ichigo outnumbered and ready to kill him. I needed power to stop that and save him. Uryu said, the weight of failing to stop Aizen coming down on his shoulders once again. So you threw away your powers, just for the chance to save your cousin? He asked, making Uryu nod. Ryuken raised himself from his seat and went to his son, giving him the first warm embrace from him in the longest time. It's easy for anyone to say what they would do with their powers. But few actually have the strength of will to give up their power. He said, squeezing a little tighter on his child. When he pulled away, Uryu looked at his father like he was staring at another person. You've made me proud of you as a father and as a teacher. You are ready for the next stage. But father, I've lost my powers. Uryu said, still in shock at the man's actions. No, they're crippled. The older Quincy stated. They can, and we will, restore them. I want you in the training room first thing tomorrow morning. He told his son, making him brighten up at the prospect of gaining his powers back. Uryu was just about to leave when his father told him one last thing. Make sure to visit your mother, Uryu. I'm sure she'll be glad to see you. His son nodded and ran off. With Orium. The bubbly barrier maiden skipped her way back to her small apartment, eager to take a relaxing bath and wait for her brother to return from their aunt's place. She became cautious when she found her door unlocked. She opened the door and moved slowly, focusing her hearing as much as she could to catch whoever might still be inside off guard. Something is going on, but it's not of any concern. She heard her brother say. Feeling relieved that it was just her brother being home, she decided to give him a little surprise. She crept along, ready to pounce, when his conversation put her on edge. Orium doesn't need to know, not yet. Her friends have everything handled. Yes, her guardian sprites have awakened, but she's fine for now. Her brother knew about the spiritual side of things. He knew about her powers and her friends. I'll take care of it when it becomes an issue. Okay, I'll tell her you love her. Bye, Oba-chan. He said, hanging up. She slowly made her way into the kitchen and exposing herself. Orium, where have you been? I was. She trailed away, seeing a strange haze around her brother's body. The air around him was shimmering like something was there but invisible. Hanging out with Ichigo and Tatsuki. She recovered. They went up into the mountains with Yoriyuki-sensei and they needed a cook. She said with a smile. Sara nodded as he accepted her excuse. They say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Endear Ichigo to you with your cooking, and make sure your deal with Tatsuki works out. He said, pushing her to be more aggressive with her boyfriend. Don't be embarrassing, Unii-chan. She pouted, heading for the bathroom. Auntie sends her love, Orium. He called after her as she left. Looks like she's gotten much stronger. He said, speaking to the being that was hidden from sight. She's noticed you. I guess we should get started sooner rather than later. The sound of a serpent hissing was the only response. Kurosaka Clinic. Ichigo returned home to find his father, already in his Shinigami form with a Shiakusho and ragged Haori over his left shoulder. He also was smoking a cigarette, surprising his son when he already had his one smoke for the year. When Ishine saw his son, he took one more drag of the tobacco stick and threw it to the ground, stepping on it to extinguish the smoldering embers. Yuzu and Karen will be joining us when we head to Soul Society. He said, walking up to his son. They wanted to meet their Shiba cousins and get stronger faster. There went to Urahara's the moment we felt you return. He then pulled his son in for a hug, Ichigo slowly returning it. I am so sorry that you had to fight him, Ichigo. You were not ready for that kind of opponent. Maybe not. Ichigo conceded. But now I have a milestone to reach. And our next fight will not end so easily in his favor. Ishine let out a hearty chuckle. That's my son. He said with a grin as they separated from each other. So how were things back in Soul Society? He asked as the father and son made their way to Urahara's, meeting place for all the Shinigami in Karakura town. Remember that white-haired third seat of yours? Ichigo asked after thinking for a moment. He became the captain of Squad 10. Ishine let out a small cheer of approval for his former third seat taking over. He was the only one that ever did the paperwork while he was a captain. After Aizen defected, the lieutenant of Squad 5 is in a catatonic state at his betrayal. Ah yes, Momo Hinamori. Ishine said, remembering the smaller and more vague details from his past. I remember her following him around like a lost puppy. She is not going to like Shinji taking back his old position. Oh yeah, he used to be Squad 5's captain, didn't he? Ichigo recalled. What do you think is going to happen anyway? Well, most likely the former captains will take back their former positions. Ishine reasoned. Because of circumstances, like the need of more soldiers and having people that can lead them, the old man might plan something out. They finally reached Urahara's shop, where Ichigo was glumped by both of his little sisters. Unii-san/Ichi-nii. They cried as they hugged him to near death. Can you tell they were worried? Ishine asked sarcastically, the assembly of former captains and lieutenants smiling at the display. This is so great. Yuzo cried in joy. Unii-san's back, we're going to see more family, Mom's dash. Still at the hospital? Karen said quickly, covering her sister's mouth. Resting. But she wouldn't mind a visit first. Right, Dad? Karen said, talking through clenched teeth. Yes. Yes, go visit your mother, Ichigo. Ishine said, catching on to what his tomboyish daughter was trying to convey. Don't worry, we'll wait. Oh, okay. Ichigo responded, feeling a little concerned by the way his family was acting. But he wouldn't mind seeing his mother again. Seeing her alive, comatose but alive because of Urahara's assurance, kept him from ever being completely depressed. So now, he made his way for the Karakura Hospital. Karakura Hospital, Masaki and Connie's. Oh, Ichigo. The two cousins met up in front of their mother's room and home for the past several years. How are things on your end? Well, everyone is ready to return to Siriti and my dad is taking my sisters to see Kyukaku. Ichigo told the Quincy. How did Ryukin take you losing your powers? He said he was proud and that tomorrow morning, we were going to work on restoring them and my advancement in training. He said, earning a surprised look from Ichigo. Yeah, apparently there is a way to restore my powers. Probably gonna put my life at risk, but I'm committed. He held out his fist to his cousin. You can't get rid of me that easily it seems. Ichigo smirked and returned the fist bump. I wouldn't have it any other way, man. The two shared another smile as they opened the door and immediately froze. Hello Urayu/Ichigo, the two mothers said to their sons. Chapter 29, Truths Revealed. Karakura Hospital. The two boys stared on in shock, disbelief of what was before them. Years of coming into this one room, seeing the same heartbreaking scene of their mothers in what could be described as a living death, only to now find something different the moment they opened up that door. Neither one of them could remember how many times they dreamed of this one moment, and how much they were torn between refusing it as reality and accepting that their long-time wish came true. For the mothers, they drifted in and out of awareness and slumber, feeling and knowing the world around them but unable to tell their family how much they loved them, how much they wanted to comfort them. The belief that they could return to their families kept them going through that hell as they remained trapped in their bodies for years. Powerless, immobile, the greatest solace was the few moments they were dreaming and watching their families grow and be happy. Come here. Masaka said, holding up a hand. My little protector. Let mother see you Urayu. Connie said. The two boys felt their bodies move, not under their own control, but out of autonomous reaction. Each slow step, quickening slightly until they reached their respective mother. The moment those hands touched their faces, they became aware of the tears streaming from their eyes. You grew up so strong and handsome. Connie said, remembering her husband telling her about their child with evident pride. Ichigo, Masaka said to her firstborn, I'm so sorry for leaving you. She hated seeing how much he had struggled, once a happy gentle boy, now a teen who had endured so much. Thank you for protecting your family. Just like that, the two cousins, the men that fought for their lives a day earlier, went back to being little boys in front of their mothers, crying out in joy and relief to have their mothers return to them. Urahara's shop. The two spent hours, crying their hearts out as their mothers comforted and reassured them that they were awake. A promise that did not last too long as they woke up that morning and spent much time and energy reconnecting with their families after so long. For Ichigo and Urayu, it was more than they could ever ask for, and Ryukin assured them that they will return home in time. Sleeping for years, even in a stasis that retained their bodies and health from the day they went into that dimmed sleep, demanded some recovery time. They would be able to return home after a month of physical therapy and readjusting to the present world. Urayu went home, happier than he had been in years. Ichigo had some more work to do, and felt ready for anything. All right. Urahara started as he and Tessai opened his Senkaimon. Seeing as Yuzu and Karen still don't have spirit bodies, they'll have to go through the spirit conversion gate. Ishine will take them through while the rest of us go with Ichigo, who I hope can use Gargantat at this point. Otherwise this is just going to be harder. I've got this Urahara. Ichigo told him. That being said, I would like the assist Zanjistu. He told his blade as the sword spirit merged with him to grant a finer control. Everybody ready? He asked, his voice becoming slightly warped. He saw the many nods of approval as Tessai opened the Senkaimon and Ichigo ripped open a portal through dimensions. All at once, everyone dove into their respective pathways into Soul Society. West Rukon, 1st District. The gateway ended in the same place it began when his son and his friends traveled to Soul Society. A place that has not seen change aside from the faces for the past few decades he was living as a human. In his arms, he carried his two precious daughters as he flash-stepped all the way through the Danga. He gently set them down as they tried to recover from the sudden acceleration and stop. Welcome girls, he said with a nostalgic grin. To Soul Society. He couldn't deny that it felt good to be back at his old home. The rustic familiarity of the Rukon districts, the mix of medieval and advanced technology, but there was one thing wrong. This place sucks, Karen said bluntly. Ishain couldn't argue against it either. The modern living world was better than Soul Society. He already missed the modern conveniences of the other world. Karen. That's not very nice. Yuzu scolded. Sure, this place seems like a downgrade, but I bet there's no fighting and everyone's happy. I don't want to say this, Yuzu, but the only thing better for everyone here is that it's cleaner. Ishain said, losing his earlier cheer. Best case scenario is to become a Shinigami, which you two are guaranteed to have the potential for. Well, look who finally decided to show up. They heard a brash voice yell out. The three Kurosaka members turned to see Kyokaku Shiba, Ganju, and their retainers, along with the emerging residents of that district. I haven't seen you in decades, Ishain. Kyokaku said, walking up to her uncle with a big smirk on her face. It's good to see you too, Kyokaku. He was saying with a smile before Kyokaku glared at him and threw a furious punch right into his face. Yuzu and Karen watched as their newly met cousin sent their dad flying with one of the meanest punches they've ever seen in their lives. That's for letting us think you were dead, ya jerk. She roared at the man as he cowered in front of the raging woman. Sheesh, all that time worrying about him and he's off making a family. She muttered to herself before noticing the two sisters, trembling at the fury of the Shiba matriarch. And you two must be Yuzu and Karen, she said, adopting a more gentle smile before dropping to their eye level. Ichigo told me about you two. She gave them a warm welcoming smile as she patted their shoulders. Nice to finally meet you two. I'm always glad to see new family. Name's Kyokaku Shiba. Then why did you punch Goat Chin? Karen asked, as the two main attendants went to the aid of the once lost branch head of the clan. I said new family, Kyokaku told her. I've known that lazy bum of an uncle for decades. She missed the surprised look of the twins at the bizarre notion of their hyperactive father ever being lazy. Speaking of which, sounds like raising a family finally kicked your ass in gear. You better not be treating these guys like you did your old division. How rude, Kyokaku, he said, in an over-exaggerated manner. I'm a father and a clinic doctor. I can't afford to be lazy. You better not be. She turned back to the twins. Sorry about that. I'm used to having to knock a few heads around to keep things running smoothly around here. She apologized to the two. Why don't we all head back to the manor and get acquainted? I know I have some things to discuss with your brother. Speaking of which, where is that strawberry? She asked as they looked around. Don't know, Kyokaku-ne, Karen said, already taking a liking to the clan head. They did take another way here. I'm sure Unii-chan and the others are all right, Yuzu said optimistically. Somewhere in Siridi. I'm not sure which is sadder, Ichigo said as he and the rest of the formerly exiled Soul Reapers were held at sword point by dozens of Onmitsukido ninjas, ready to execute them. That fact that this happened or that I expected it to happen. Most of the wizards kept their calm. Hiyori was about to rage until Hachigen put her in a Kido barrier everyone called the timeout corner. Kisuk was Kisuk, and Tessai was ready for a quick getaway. Yoryuki left them to get the one person that could stop this from escalating. Well, you're early, they heard someone say from above. They all looked up to see Swafon next to Yoryuki, standing on a building. But I think you should have used a Senkaimon. Nice to see you too, Swafon, Urahara called out lazily. The years have been kind to you, I see. Ichigo could see Swafon twitch before Yoryuki put a calming hand on her shoulder. She sighed out in resignation and Ichigo began to think he might have an ally when it comes to getting payback on the annoying mad scientist. By order of the acting leader of Soul Society, Captain Commander Yamamoto, you will all be escorted to the 1st Division to discuss the return of the previously missing in action captains and lieutenants. She decreed as the ninjas sheathed their blades and relaxed before vanishing from sight. You all remember the way, I take it. Without waiting for any reply, she herself disappeared. She really doesn't like you, does she? Ichigo asked Kisuke as the group began to head toward the 1st Division barracks. When I was first brought up to be promoted to captaincy, she protested on the grounds that I was lazy and incompetent at my own job in the detention corps. Urahara explained. She then stalked me for a while to dig up any dirt she could. Not only did Yuriuki dismiss all of her evidence, she thought Swaifon had a crush on me. Swaifon hates how much undeserved faith Yuriuki had in me and probably blames me for her self-imposed exile when Tessai and I were arrested. He spoke the last part with an odd seriousness that Ichigo had only seen when he said anything to do with the darker parts of his past. Only for him to whip out his fan and hold it in front of his face. But it's okay. I'll be sure to apologize to her for developing a crush on me. He said with a chuckle, only for Swaifon to appear out of nowhere, with the most pissed-off expression Ichigo had ever seen on anyone, and slam her foot into his face so hard that there was a shockwave that sent the blonde man flying through the walls. I never had a crush on you, you lazy, good-for-nothing, lunatic. She roared with venom dripping from her tone. The entire group was watching with their eyes bulging out in shock and terror at the petite ninja. Yeah, he deserved that. Shinji said as everyone else dismissed him for his idiocy. Except for Hiyori who was cheering Swaifon on. Hey Swaifon. Ichigo called out to her. You mind sending someone to the West Rokon? My dad is there visiting family. She regarded him for a second before nodding to someone and there was a flash of movement. Thanks. Captain's Assembly. It was a time of happiness for most of the assembled captains, allies long thought lost returned. Kiraku attempted to hug his former lieutenant only to be met with a foot to the face and an actually happy greeting from Lisa. The rest of the former captains and lieutenants were happy to meet each other once again, until they had to put Hiyori back into the Kido box when Mayuri dismissed the annoying monkey boy and trying to get Ichigo to agree being subjected to series of experiments, both out of natural curiosity and to forget that he and Urahara were in the same room again. Ishine was showering praise on his former third seat. I was right to trust the future of the squad to Utashiro. Ishine said to the blushing captain as Ishine held him up like he used to many years ago. Please put me down, Captain Shiba. The young captain asked, still having respect for his predecessor, despite his waning patience. Enough. Yamamoto called out, slamming his cane on the ground and forcing everyone's attention on him. First off, thank you all for gathering here once again. I apologize for the actions of 100 years ago, and hold myself as personally responsible. The fault's mine, Yamamoto. Shinji spoke up. I made Aizen my lieutenant because I never trusted him and I never recognized the difference between him and his illusions. But I just as quickly condemned all of you for things out of your control. Do not take my failure on your shoulders. The old commander said, the weight of another mistake weighing on his shoulders. Before we continue, it's safe to assume you know everything. And already began setting up a defensive measure. Kisuke said happily. Mayuri, did Chad and Uriah place all those tags like I asked them to? Yes, though I don't know why you made over 1 billion Kido seal tags meant to seal away Quincy's all over Soul Society. Mayuri said, not privy to Ichigo and Yama's conversation from earlier. Simple. Urahara said, turning serious as he pulled out a detonator switch. The Vandenreich watches from the shadows. He said before pushing the button. A thunderous crack shook the entirety of Soul Society as the brightest light consumed the realm. Silburn. The Emperor and his most elite guard were watching the meeting of their hated enemies, dismissing the gathering as a small roadblock they would inevitably be ready for. That was before the two scientists revealed a ploy they were not ready for. The Vandenreich watches from the shadows. Urahara said before pushing the button. Suddenly, their shadowy kingdom was engulfed in blinding light that lasted for what seemed like hours. When their sight returned, they could no longer find any connection to Soul Society. What happened? Wak roared. His minions scrambled about to try to find any answer, coming to only one conclusion. They were locked out of Soul Society and in a separate space. Captain's meeting. And that should buy us a few years. Urahara said after sight returned to everyone and people calmed down. Plenty of time to deal with Aizen before we have to worry about the Vandenreich. Very good. Yamamoto said approvingly, trusting one of the smartest men he's ever met. Maybe they'll strengthen it in time after the whole Aizen thing ends. For those of you unaware, Ichigo's reason for meeting with me was to warn us about the return of the Quincy King Waiwak. When he returns, all life and creation will be at risk. Fortunately, we have a few more years to wait before they can attempt anything. Till then, we deal with Aizen. There were unanimous nods of agreement and a bloodthirsty grin from Kenpeki. With the Central 46 dead and a war looming over our heads, I am issuing martial law and assume full authority over Soul Society. With that authority, I offer the captain positions of Squads 3, 5, and 9 back to Captains Odoribashi, Hirako, and Meguruma with double pay for the next century should they accept it. That sounds like a good deal, Kensei said, musing about how to keep Mashiro out of his money stash. Yay. Back to Kensei's official lieutenant. Mashiro cheered. Squad 9 still has a lieutenant, Toshiro said bluntly. Super Lieutenant Mashiro is back in action. Not that it affected Mashiro's mood in the slightest. You're really good with kids, Kensei, Yukatake said, chuckling slightly. Shut up, Juashiro, the wizard grumbled. Hey, Captain Hirako, Toshiro called out to the reinstated captain. There's something I should warn you about. What, kiddo? Shinji asked, irking the white-haired captain almost immediately. It's about your new Lieutenant Momo Hinamori. She practically worshipped Aizen and reacted less than well with his betrayal, he said, talking cautiously about his friend's infatuation. And now she's catatonic and refusing reality with every fiber of her being, just praying that Aizen will come back to his senses. Shinji asked bluntly. Hitsugaya nodded. That's not my problem. She's a lieutenant, she has a job I expect her to perform. If she can't, I'll find someone that will. I'm her captain first before anything else. If you're her friend, then you help her out, he said bluntly, shocking some people, but most acknowledged the harsh lesson. She's a lieutenant-class Soul Reaper, she has to be a tough girl and should learn to stand on her own. Toshiro glared at the man, but understood him on some level. He reacted in a similar manner when she was distraught over Aizen's faked death. Tessai and Hachigen may return to their command positions within the Kido Corps, Yamamoto continued, with a nod of acceptance from the two spell masters. And in light of certain revelations from the Quincy, Urayu Ishida, Urahara is given back his old position as captain of Squad 12. Mayuri looked like someone punched him in the stomach while Urahara laughed. Nice to be back, Lieutenant Mayuri, he said, making the med scientist glare at him. Absolutely not, Mayuri yelled out in defiance. I refuse to go back to being your underling. And what revelations? For starters, I ordered you to stay away from Ichigo while he was recovering, but you repeatedly made trips to his room. Yama started. Mayuri tried to say something when the old man continued. The numerous times you arranged for the deaths of hundreds of Quincy that were under our protection, with much of that research now being practically outdated considering how your fight with Uriah went. The complaints made by several of your squad that you used them as bombs when the only person that was killed on sight was still Ichigo Kurosaki, whom you were not even close to. Finally, you are a completely immoral sadist that was only made captain of Squad 12 because you were the smartest man at the time. Every day I weighed the options of putting you back in the maggot's nest and letting you rot. That did not deter Mayuri, who continued to protest while trying to defend his decisions. Ichigo, you can spare an arm, right? Urahara asked while the argument continued. Ichigo nodded and presented his right arm. Kisuke pulled out a glass tube big enough for Ichigo to fit his arm into and was sealed within, cutting off Ichigo's arm at the elbow. As Ichigo yelled out in pain, catching everyone's attention, Urahara tossed Ichigo's preserved severed arm to his new lieutenant. Here's an arm. Go play. You expect me to be content with? Mayuri growled before Ichigo's arm regrew from the stump at his elbow from a flare of black reishi. Amazing. Ichigo is a one-of-a-kind hybrid with Soul Reaper, Quincy, and Hollow abilities all rolled into one, Kisuke bragged. You quit your bitching and you can have as many samples as you want. Mayuri began salivating at the veritable experimental gold mine that was Ichigo Kurosaki. He just needed to swallow his pride. I officially resign my positions in favor of becoming second in command. he said, cradling the container like a newborn baby. Not gonna lie, I'm surprised that worked. Urahara said, shocked that Mayuri accepted so easily. Don't think you can bribe me, Baldy. Hiyori said, freed from her Kido prison. I'm not sticking around here. Then I leave my shop to you, Hiyori. Kisuke said dramatically. I set it up to be a mobile command center for the Shinigami in the living world. Hiyori simply shrugged, still hating the idea but wanting to help what friends she had. May we continue? Yamamoto growled, making everyone snap back to attention. Good. Now, in light of the coming war, we will need more soldiers, order, and swifter action to be taken in the world of the living. Therefore, I am creating 2 new squads. Squad 14 will be the Rukon force, keeping order in the districts and searching for individuals with the ability to become Soul Reapers. Squad 15 will be the Living World unit, a squad solely for the living world since we've seemed to be unable to deal with problems there effectively. Karakura Town seems to be the hotspot for this, so that's where Squad 15 will set up. I'll be the captain of Squad 14. Love volunteered. Ishine, you got a family, man. The only thing for me in that world is my precious manga. He said, melodramatically and actually crying a little. Everyone else looked at him like he was an idiot, even Urahara. You know, we could probably set something up for you. Ichigo said, making the star afro-haired man shift moods immediately. Thank you, Ichigo. Aikawa called out, hugging the hybrid and squeezing the life out of him. He finally let go after Kenpeka punched him in the face pretty hard. Don't break him. Gonna fight him later. He said as Ichigo realigned his spine. Continuing, Yamamoto said, Captains Love and Ishine, you will have to build up your squads yourselves later. For now, we need to know what we're up against. Urahara, what is the Hogyaku? Urahara suddenly shifted back to his serious mode as he explained what his creation was capable of. The Hogyaku is meant to be able to break down the boundaries between Soul Reaper and Hollow, granting one the power of the other and becoming that much stronger as a result. However, while training Ichigo, I did a few more experiments and discovered something frightening. 1. The Hogyaku was incomplete, and 2. At full power it could grant anyone their heart's desire. A cold unease came over everyone in the room. I have a suspicion that Aizen knows about the former because he may have created his own Hogyaku and wanted mine to complete it. Which is a good thing he never got it. He said, surprising everyone. But I saw Aizen tear it out of Rukia. Ichigo defended, leading Urahara to wave his finger at the boy. I suspected Aizen would know that I would put the Hogyaku in Rukia's being, but then I wondered. Would he know because it was something I would do? Put the Hogyaku into the body of someone that knew nothing about it and sacrifice that person heartlessly? Likely, so I did something I would never do unless I thought it would work. He said, pulling out a small vial that coated his arm, and performed the same ritual Aizen did with Rukia, plunging his hand into Ichigo's chest. Have someone know about the power and dangers of it, instilling the desire to hide and seal it away, making it untraceable. He pulled his hand out to reveal the same black sphere Ichigo swallowed to become a Soul Reaper. This is where I hid the Hogyaku. Chapter 30, Swords and Seals. Shiba Estate. Hours passed after that set of revelations at the captain's meeting. Yamamoto ordered the Hogyaku to be considered on par with a holy relic and sealed away immediately, which Tessai and Hachigen started working on immediately. Swaifon tried to protest that Yoryuki wasn't given back her station, but those complaints died when Yoryuki herself made it clear that she'll operate on her own terms, in order to focus on training Ichigo and his friends, and made it an order for Swaifon to fulfill her duties as leader of the Onmitsukido. Yamamoto then made another decree for all Shinigami to train harder, and lieutenants were required to learn Bankai as soon as possible. Kenpeka was eager to start his training by fighting Ichigo, but after a quick checkup from Anohana it was put on hold until he recovered from having the Hogyaku torn from his being. It took the combined strength of Komamura, Love, Ishine, Tessai, and Kensei, to hold him back from maiming Urahara while Mayuri slashed him with Ashizaji Jizo. Ichigo and Rukia went on that date she said he owed her, having tea together, telling stories about their pasts, and visiting the gravesite of Rukia's friends. He was in a normal shiakusho again while she wore the dress Uriah made. Their date was coming to a close at the Shiba home where people started gathering. They found Genju and he told them that it was a Shiba tradition to host a fireworks festival whenever someone is either born or brought into the family. He left them saying that they needed to celebrate 4 times harder because they had 4 new family members in the Kurosaka family, claiming they'll do it again when Masaka can finally join in celebrating. Almost every captain and lieutenant came to attendance. Mayuri engrossed himself with research in Ichigo's arm, Toshiro was visiting Momo in the hospital, and Tessai and Haki were working on sealing away the Hogyaku. The divisions welcomed the returning captains surprisingly easily as they brought swift order back into the squads, and the Kido Corps sorely missed their previous leaders. What surprised people was that Byakuya and several elders of the Kukaki clan came to attend. "That's something I never thought I'd see," Rukia said, seeing her clan's leaders come to the party. "They don't socialize much?" Ichigo asked, seeing Byakuya nod at him before going to Kyokaku as they began talking. "From what I heard," the duo heard from behind them, "the Kukaki clan are a stiff bunch while the Shibas are much more relaxed in their actions." They turned to see what could be described as a smaller male Yoryuki. He smiled before giving a slight bow. "I'm Yasuhiro Shihaorin, 23rd clan head and younger brother of Yoryuki. Thank you for taking care of my sister Ichigo Kurosaki." "No problem," Ichigo said, holding out a hand to shake, which Yasuhiro took gratefully. "She's helped me quite a lot. I take it she's made amends with her clan." "I was always ready to forgive Onisama," he said with a smile. "She was put back into the clan registry the second we got news of the situation." His mood then turned gloomy as tears formed in his eyes. "But I still haven't seen her. I miss her so much." "Stop crying," Yoryuki said, suddenly showing up behind her brother. "The clan head shouldn't cry." Yasuhiro attempted to hug his sister before she punched him on the head. "Hold yourself with more dignity, Yasuhiro. The other clans are here." "Why yes, Onisama," he said, just happy to see his sister again. She then pulled him away from Ichigo and Rukia. "Come on, tell me how you've been," she said, deciding to spend some time with family as the current festivities dictated. His eyes shined and she regretted her choice. Soon Kaganihiko and Shiraganihiko came by to pull Ichigo away for the ceremony, telling him he could continue his date later. He was brought to a stage where the rest of his family were waiting for him, with Yuzu and Karen in ceremonial kimonos. Yuzu's were white with autumn leaves while Karen's looked like a starry sky. "Uni-I-chan!" Yuzu cheered when Ichigo showed up, twirling around to show off her kimono. "How do I look?" Ichigo chuckled at his little sister, seeing that even Karen couldn't help but show off as well. "You both look lovely in those." He smiled down at them as they all hugged each other. Ishine smiled in pride at his family as the finishing touches were made. "Thank you all for coming," Kyokaku yelled out to the assembled guests, Soul Reapers, and Rokon folk, nobles and peasants, all socializing in the light of the Shiba festivities. "It is my joy and privilege to usher in the new members of the Shiba family." She gestured to the 3 siblings as all eyes fell on them. "My cousins, Ichigo, Yuzu, and Karen Kurosaki." Everyone began clapping as Genju and his group started shooting off fireworks, setting the sky ablaze with a rainbow of flashing lights. "Now let's have fun," she yelled as most people in attendance cheered in unison. Soon everyone gave in to the merriment. Rangiku, Ishine, and others were drinking, the nobles conversed normally amongst themselves as friends, children were playing games set up at various stalls, every now and then a single firework to light up the sky and tease the coming show. All displays that the Shiba clan was coming back and brought people together in celebration. After a couple of hours, Ichigo managed to find Rukia again and they continued with their date, finding someplace quiet to enjoy themselves. "So, happy to become a Soul Reaper?" Rukia asked, munching on some rice dumplings they got. "You finally got to meet the rest of your family after all." Ichigo merely chuckled. "The whole Shinigami bit is debatable," Ichigo admitted as they sat down. "But I'm glad I found the other half of my family." He wrapped an arm around her shoulder and pulled her in. "I'm also glad I met you." The intimate action forced her blush as she prayed he wouldn't catch on. "Are you blushing?" She was not lucky. "And no, I'm not." She tried to deny as she turned away. Yes you are. He continued, playfully making her face him again. Now your obsession with bunnies makes sense, you're as cute as one. He said, only adding fuel to the fire. Listen you fool. She said, trying to regain some dignity. I do not resemble them. They are the cutest little balls of fur in the whole world. She ranted before Ichigo put a pair of white bunny ears on her head. Just something he won earlier. There. A cute little snow bunny. He said, smirking in victory as steam came off of Rukia's head. She was about to yell at him when hundreds of fireworks lit up the sky, even more magnificent than when the party started. The Shibas lived up to their title of fireworks masters. Ichigo and Rukia stared in awe of the beautiful flashes. Ichigo pulled Rukia in front of him and held her securely against him. Good date? He asked, looking down at her. She smiled and pulled him in for a simple kiss. It's a start. She told him as he returned the kiss. The next day. Captain's meeting. The parties ended and work began in earnest for the returning Soul Reapers. Lisa decided to join as Hein's new squad to manage things at the Urahara Shoten that Hiyori would soon take over as the main base for Squad 15. Hiyori would handle the technical stuff while Lisa would keep the things in order for Hein. Urahara and Mayuri began the process to turn Yuzu and Karen into Soul Reapers while Yamamoto and Hein discussed their attendance at Shino Academy. Rose, Shinji, and Kensei didn't miss a beat when they returned to their divisions, except for a minor hiccup with Mashiro insisting she was Kensei's lieutenant that almost erupted into a fight before he gave her a badge that said First Light while Hisagi got Second Light. Toshiro continued to visit Momo, trying his hardest to help her recover from the shock of her idol betraying her. Everything was going as normal, until Rose found something in his room at his barracks. Something that demanded everyone's attention. That leads to now, Ichigo entering the meeting room of the First Division. Hey Toshiro. Ichigo greeted the small captain. What's this meeting about? Apparently Captain Odoribashi found something in his office. Hitsugaya explained as the rest of the captains came in. Something Jin left behind. Which is shocking because he's not someone that would leave a trail. So it's something intentional. Swaifo chimed in. Mine and Urahara's squads found nothing out of the ordinary with it, then the head captain called this meeting. That was when Genri Yusai called the meeting to order. Now, I've called you all here because of a discovery that was made earlier this morning. The ancient man explained before nodding to Rose. This morning, I discovered a Kido barrier hiding this in my office. He said, opening the letter to read for everyone. It's from Jin Ichimaru. Most of the captains tensed at that statement. If you are reading this, I've already betrayed Soul Society and left to follow Sosuke Aizen in his quest. Aizen's intentions are to create for himself an army of hollows with the powers of Shinigami, retrieve an experiment of Urahara's to further his goals, and to create a key to the realm of the Soul King. I've joined him, not to help him, but to kill him. Everything I've done, was to get into a position to finally kill him. My reasons for this is simple, revenge. Aizen hurt one of the few people I've ever truly cared for and I've sworn to kill him. No matter the cost. I do not write this to justify my actions, but to prepare a backup plan should I fail. Aizen has performed many experiments over the centuries of his life. The results of which has led to the hollowification incident 100 years ago, experimental hollows that killed Lieutenant Kaien Shiba and wounded Captain Hein Shiba. The latter led to a union that brought about what is possibly his biggest unintentional success, Ichigo Kurosaki. The only hybrid being of Quincy, Soul Reaper, and Hollow. If you've found this before the war Aizen is planning, then I urge you, train Ichigo Kurosaki. Make him grow to the peak of what powers he is capable of. If I ultimately fail and die, he is your best hope in stopping him. I'll try to find some way to assist in any way I can. I've little reason to believe I'll survive through this, and even if I do, then I'll be rotting in the maggot's nest for the rest of my life. But if it kills Aizen, I don't care. Sincerely, the former captain of Squad 3, Jin Ichimaru. Damn. Love said. That's heavy. And mostly unnecessary. Yamamoto said. I was already planning on having Ichigo trained for this coming war with the Quincy, but hearing that Aizen seeks to create an Oken is troubling. Oken? Ichigo asked. is that Wada let him into the royal realm. The location of the Oaken, the king's key, is only known by the captain-commander of the court guard squads and is passed by word of mouth only. The old dragon explained. To hear that Aizen may have found a way to create one is most troubling. I want his search history. Find out what he's planning to do. Urahara. Understood, Commander. The eccentric man said in an odd moment of seriousness. With that, Yamamoto called the meeting to a close and everyone began to leave. Where are you going, Ichigo? He asked as the hybrid began to leave. I'm heading for Squad 4. Going to see if I can fight Kenpeki yet. He said, gaining a look from everyone in the room. Fighting him will be the best conditioning I can get, won't it? Many thought he was crazy, but everyone knew that he was right and probably had a death wish. Ichigo, Rose spoke up, there's more to the letter. Mainly for you. Squad 14's temporary base. West Rokon 1st District. Love Ikawa was going over mountains of paperwork. Applicants to join, construction costs, budget reports, it was a nightmare. Thankfully he had some decent help when Lisa offered a hand before returning to the living world. But for what he was supposed to do, and what he was planning, he was going to need more time and help. The decision to create a Rokon patrol did not sit well with some groups. The 1st District of West Rokon was the only group willing to listen and allow him to set up base there. Luckily, his most current interview offered a helping hand in a big way. Your brother was a good man. Love said to the man in front of him. Now what do you believe you can offer to the Rokon squad, Ganju Shiba? Ganju had his friends with him, dedicating himself to honor his brother's memory by doing some good as a Shinigami. I've got the trust of people all over the Rokon districts and I know these districts. He told the returning captain. I could help promote the presence of Soul Reapers in the Rokon districts, get reliable people to help with various odd jobs that you'll need done, which will help the people of the Rokon as much as the division. I only ask one thing. This caught Love's attention as he focused more intently on the thug. Many people still want to reunite with lost family members when they come from the world of the living. I want to use the manpower you eventually gain to help these scattered families. Ganju said with all the professional seriousness he could hope to muster. Love continued a focused stare on him before cracking up. Ahahahaha. He started crying out. Oh man. This is just rich. Ganju blushed, feeling embarrassed that this man was stomping on all the effort he put into making this interview. You're like a side character trying to make an impact in a manga. Love just kept laughing. This is too good. I love it. After he finally calmed down and caught his breath did he regard Ganju again. Oh, I needed a good laugh. Thank you. In all seriousness though, I was already trying to figure out a way to do just what you asked. So when I finally have a squad that can do that, you can be in charge of those efforts. He extended a hand to the Shiba man. Welcome to Squad 14. Ganju smiled in relief and clapped the captain's hand. Happy to be here. He responded with a confident smirk. Let's get you guys situated. He said before calling out. Hey, Shusuke. Makoto. Two men appeared, the former looking rather unkempt with messy blue hair while the latter had slicked back red hair with purple-rimmed glasses. My lieutenant and third seat, Shusuke Amagai and Makoto Kaibyun. These guys will help you all settle in. He said with a smile. Yes sir. They both nodded to their captain while Amagai issued them to follow him. Ganju was about to join when Love grabbed him. Keep an eye on them. Love whispered, not a single hint of humor in his tone. Makoto's got an ego and there's something about Amagai I don't trust. He explained, surprising Ganju. Now laugh when I do. He pulled away. And Shinji didn't even know what V-Club meant when he called us that. Ahahaha. He laughed heavily as Ganju started laughing with him. Thank you. I needed that. Ganju said, nodding at his new captain's orders. Glad to help. Love said, getting back to his paperwork. Squad 10, Rangiku Matsumoto. Rangiku took a deep breath and reflected on the events of the day, as things started to settle down. Toshiro almost got a response from Momo before she returned to her catatonic state. Several other Soul Reapers were offering their assistance to Captain Love and others were applying for her old captain's new division. She was glad to find out he was alive and the party yesterday served as a good distraction. All the hustle and bustle left her to her thoughts, that one of her oldest friends was a traitor and she couldn't stop it. "Hello," she heard suddenly, making her jump in surprise. "Rangiku." She turned to see her former captain's son. "Oh, you're Ichigo," she said, meeting the hybrid for the first time in her life. "I was at the party yesterday. You Shiba folk really know how to have fun." Her mood got better when she saw what he had with him. "Are those dried persimmons?" she said, pointing at the small bag in his hand. Yeah," Ichigo responded, pulling out one of the shriveled fruits while handing her the bag. "I heard you liked them. Took forever to get my hands on these considering I had no money." He took a bite of dried fruit, letting the sweet taste dance on his tongue. "Thank you for the gift," she said, flashing a teasing smile. "How about I return the favor?" She traced a finger around her cleavage, making Ichigo stutter in embarrassment at her shameless flirting before she pulled out a bottle of liquor. "Come on. You gotta have a fun side to you. Your captain is Hein's son after all." And she somehow got Ichigo to start drinking with her. After a few cups between them, mostly her, she asked something that was bugging her. "So, what made you want to talk to me?" she asked, slurred after drinking most of the first bottle and half of the second one, while Ichigo was on a third cup. "Well," Ichigo started, thinking back to the rest of Jin's letter. "Hey Ichigo, if you're reading this, do me a favor. Look after Rangiku for me. She's been like a sister to me. Could have been more, but I distanced myself to focus on my mission. I've been watching you a long time, you're the only one I trust with this. Keep it a secret though, she shouldn't cry over an ass like me. Dad said you seemed depressed yesterday. Like you needed a friend." She looked at him with calm, focused eyes that belied how much she was drinking. "I really don't like seeing anyone sad, not when I could help." He looked at her to see her giving him teary, puppy eyes. He was immediately on edge after that. "You are such a sweetie," she cried out, hugging Ichigo into her chest and cutting off his air supply. "You are so much better than that jerk Jin. Always running off, never telling me where he went." She ranted while Ichigo was struggling for breath. She also felt something in his coat pockets. She pulled him away. Ichigo started gasping for air, and finally got a good look at him. "A gentleman and a hottie. How about I give you a little something for being so nice?" "Rangiku, are you drunk?" Ichigo asked as she leaned in, licking her lips. "Maybe," she said before she pounced on him. Squad 4 Barracks. It was the next morning and Ichigo was nursing a minor hangover. Hoping to find some relief, he went to the medical facility of the 4th Division, mainly to find what his current condition was, but he could kill two birds with one stone. Anohana was currently applying a special Kido to him in an effort to relieve his pain. "I first developed this spell to help Kiraku after he drank too much," Anohana said, lecturing the teen. "After a couple times, I worked out all the kinks and let him suffer for his own poor judgment. I expected better out of you, young man." "Sorry, Captain Anohana," he groaned, still feeling a dull throb in his head. "I shouldn't be testing my limits my first time drinking. I believe your friend said he was underage. What do you think your father would say about this?" she asked, believing fatherhood taught us Hein some responsibility. "Since I was drinking with Rangiku, he'd congratulate me on his." He trailed off as he mentally counted, 5th daughter. "Though when he finds out I'm dating Rukia as well, he'll demand I start making him grandchildren." Anohana felt herself sweat drop. That is, Hein has changed, but not for the better. "I see," she said, finishing up her treatment of the boy. "Well, try not to drink too much if you can't avoid it," she said, looking over his chart again. "In other news, you seem well enough to fight again." She grabbed Ichigo as he shot up and prepared to bolt. "Head for Sokioka Hill. We want to contain the damage." She let go and he disappeared in a burst of speed. "Better send word to the others," she said before hell butterflies flew toward the Kido Corps base and the barracks of Squad 1 and 12. Urahara, Tessai, and Hachigen were preparing something special. Sokioka Hill. The second Ichigo told Kenpeka that Anohana gave him the clear to fight and where it had to be. He bolted as fast as he could, managing to beat Ichigo's flash step by a single second. Now they stood there, each one eagerly anticipating their next fight, waiting for the moment to strike. Yachiro jumped off to the sidelines the second Kenpeka stopped, waiting for the two to clash. Suddenly they charged at each other and slammed their blades together, creating a massive gust. Then the three Kido masters that Anohana contacted earlier dropped from the sky and began conjuring a barrier. You wanted to use sparring with Captain Zaraki as your conditioning, then you may. Genri Yusai said as he and Anohana made themselves known to the two fighters. Within this barrier that Captains Urahara, Tessai, and Lieutenant Hachigen created, your wounds will heal indefinitely. A way to even the battleground between the two of you. A battle of attrition, ending only when one of you finally exhaust yourself. The barrier finally sealed the two in and they tested Yamamoto's words with Kenpeka slashing his hand. True to the ancient commander's word, it was healed instantly. Kenpeka gave Ichigo a feral grin as the hybrid covered himself in his hollow armor and wings of flaring reishi as he created his field of blades. The barrier muffled the sounds, but their clashing could still be heard into the Rukon districts. Naraki City, Skyushin headquarters. Chad took the chance and called the number on the card he was given. After following a set of instructions given to him when he called, he finally got the location of the group called Skyushin. They said that they could help him grow stronger, that was all that mattered to him now. If something went wrong, he knew Ichigo would knock some sense into him. He entered an apartment that looked like a classy bar with an old bartender wearing a leather strap over his right eye, a man with combed back hair and an X-shaped pendant, a girl around his age with twin pigtails in her magenta hair, a dark-skinned woman with knee-length boots, a blonde boy with dark clothes, and a man with wavy hair and a scar along his left eye. "Welcome, Yasutara Sato, to our Skyushin," the man with the pendant said. "I'm Kyujo Jinjo." He pointed to the others in the room. The man behind the bar is Giriko Kutsuzawa, the pig-tailed girl, Ririka Dakugamine, the woman with the boots, Jackie Tristan, the blonde boy, Yukio Hans Vorarlberna, and finally the scarred man, Shukuro Tsukishima. "We are people with the same powers as you. The power known as Full Bring," Kyujo explained as Chad walked further into the room, scanning the occupants and staying on guard as Yoriyuki taught him. "My power is called Full Bring," he asked, sitting across from Kyujo. "What is Full Bring?" The man chuckled. "Full Bring is the power to control the soul of objects," he said before the drink beside him began to glow. "All objects have a soul," he said as the liquid inside it rose toward his mouth. "Full Bringers can manipulate that soul to do various things they want. Move great distances, walk on water, fly through the air, and the ability to drink without moving any part of my body. That last one is much less impressive, isn't it?" "That doesn't explain my arms," Chad said, transforming his right arm. Kyujo merely smirked. "It actually does. A Full Bringer's signature ability comes from what they have an affinity for. The object they have a strong connection to," he explained before his necklace turned into a large claymore with an extended handle between the blade and guard. "You must take great pride in your arms, Sato. They're what helps me keep my promise," he said, his mind going to his coin medallion in thought. "How does one become a Full Bringer?" "You fought other spirit beings, correct?" Kyujo asked, making Chad nod in response. "You recognize that our powers are closer to Hollows than Soul Reapers, correct?" Another nod. "Our powers come from the hollow Reishi left inside one of our parents that survived the attack then had a child." Chad thought back to his parents, remembering a weird scar on one of them. Then he remembered when his powers first manifested. "My father is a Shinigami," Ichigo's voice echoing in his mind. "My mother was a Quincy. They met when he was hunting a powerful hollow that she killed after being bit. That's where all my abilities come from. The rarest instance of Deus Ex BS ever. So one of the parents have to survive being attacked by a hollow?" He asked for clarification. Kyujo nodded, carefully scrutinizing the muscled teen. "I might know someone else with a Full Bring." "Ichigo Kurosaki?" Kyujo asked, making Chad's eyes widen. "We're unsure on how to approach him. He has so much power already, but if he's willing to help us, then by all means. Bring him in. Everyone never noticed the dark grin on Tsukishima's face. Karakura Hospital, Quincy Training Hall. Uriah ran as hard as he could away from the endless barrage of arrows his father shot at him. He said that before they could restore his powers, they had to build up his stamina and endurance. Ryukin would come at him with the intention of killing him and they would only stop when he said so. Uriah was running for his life for days. This was to prepare for the war and his enemies would try to kill him, so he had to have the same mindset. He saw the logic, but he couldn't bring himself to come at his father with those intentions. Don't be foolish, Uriah, Ryukin said as he continued to fire a stream of arrows at his fleeing son. The enemy is the enemy. They will kill you if you don't kill them. Uriah got behind a barrier to catch his breath. Did you wait when you struck down those hollows? Would you have hesitated if you were permitted to kill those Shinigami? Knowing that your enemies are other Quincy, can you bring yourself to kill them when they are murdering your allies? Wak will not spare Ichigo, he almost killed your mother. Uriah thought back to that dark day his mother had her powers torn from her, years spent sleeping, taken from her family. All because of the damned parasite emperor that he felt no murderous intent for. It infuriated him. He hated that man, but he felt his own power refusing to harbor such thoughts. He ran out from behind his cover, forcing every ounce of rage and hate for the man that threatened existence and projected that onto his father, seeing a giant man with long dark hair and a thick mustache looking down on him like an ant. No more! Uriah roared, throwing 4 Jinto capsules at the illusion. Feel the wrath of battle and accept this sacred chalice. Heizan! He yelled out, summoning a square prism of silver light from the Jinto. He saw his father now, bracing against the attack, but not even affected. His vision began to blur as he felt his body give out. Grit your teeth. He heard his father say as he was shot in the chest. He collapsed, feeling the spirit arrow pierce his flesh. Pushed to the point of complete exhaustion and shot with a spirit arrow, 19 millimeters to the right of the heart. He said, walking up to his son, wincing from the collective burns from the spell. Your powers will return to you, my son. He said with a rare smile, looking down at the Quincy mark on Uriah's chest that indicated their return. Have to work on that killing instinct though. He said, picking his child up. Let's get you to bed. Sokioka Hill, days later. Genri Yusai and Anohana listened to the continued clashing between Ichigo and Kenpeki as they made their way back to the battle site. When they arrived, they found a good number of Squad 12 with Mayuri directing them. There were I.V stands dripping a glowing blue liquid into the 3 Kido masters maintaining the barrier, while most of the squad members seemed to be making more, refilling the bags, and replacing them. Inside, Ichigo took on a new appearance with long wild hair, 2 long horns, and a slim body wielding a black katana, while Kenpeki looked more like a demon than ever. The only clothes left on either body was their pants. Mayuri, what's happened? Anohana asked. Those Neanderthals happened. Mayuri growled, typing away at a machine and yelling at his subordinates. They just seem to grow in power as the fight goes on. Instead of which one of them will fall, it's whether the barrier can outlast them. He turned to face the 2 captains. Kenpeki just keeps getting stronger, and Ichigo is adapting to that strength. Kenny was always that strong. They heard Yachiro say as she popped up out of nowhere. Kenny is the strongest there is. Ichi is bringing that out. Soon he'll be back to his old self. She said with the brightest smile she could manage. Anohana stared at the fight in awe. Those eyes. She thought in wonder, remembering she first met the current Kenpeki when he was just a boy. The only one to ever wound her, her true successor to the name of Kenpeki. No. This was my sin to undo, Ichigo. You can't take this from me. I bet Kenny will say my real name any dash, Yachiro said before her body disappeared, leaving only her clothes. Inside the barrier, Zaraki got a massive axe with a cleaver blade to replace his chipped sword. That's when a crack appeared in the barrier. Oh no! Mayuri said as the crack spread. Run! Everyone scrambled to safety, leaving only Anohana and Yamamoto to watch the chaos. Kenpeki and Ichigo swung their weapons at full force and created a windstorm from the clash, destroying the barrier and blasting the equipment away. Ichigo caught the blade and fired a zero from his horns at Kenpeki, who powered through it to punch Ichigo in the face. Ichigo was sent flying before charging back at his opponent. He dodged a fast swing from the Berserker and sent a Getsuga Tensho at Kenpeki, who returned it, slashing Ichigo across his stomach. Kenpeki tanked the attack while the wound on Ichigo bubbled and exploded into a mass of mouthed tendrils, all biting down on Kenpeki. He tore his arms free and slashed them to pieces while hundreds of dark blue and dark red spheres appeared. From each one shot millions of projectiles, spirit arrows, balas, and zeros, all aimed at Zaraki. He grinned and swung his axe, destroying all of them. The two, still lost in their fight, charged at each other before Yamamoto appeared between them and punched them both in the chest. Ichigo's hollow armor shattered while a loud crunch was heard from Kenpeki. While they fell, Haki and Tessai appeared behind the two. Bakudo number 99. Kin. They chanted in unison, not taking many chances as the two fighters' arms were bound in black bands and sealed to the ground. The two spell masters planted their hands on the ground. Bankin. Prologue, halting raps. Cloth exploded from where their hands were. Refrain, serial 100 bolts. Hundreds of needles stabbed into the mummified fighters. Finale, fully prohibited Great Seal. Giant metal blocks dropped on their heads, only to break apart after contact. Both warriors collapsed as everyone caught their breath. I take it we're done? Ichigo asked as the two gasped for breath. Squad 4 barracks, later that day. The two of them finally came down from their adrenaline highs and they were aching. Every part of them hurt. Kenpeki even said that he was satisfied for a good while, which Ichigo guessed would last a week till he wanted to fight again. When word reached the 11th, they swarmed the hospital, singing praises about their incredible captain, being so strong without having a Shikai, now had to be invincible now that he did. He quickly had them all thrown out for being so noisy. Sheesh. He groaned, settling back into bed with the help of Ikeku and Yumi Chika. You'd think they know to shut up in the hospital. You really have a loyal squad, Kenpeki. Ichigo quipped, being the only other patient in the room. Yeah, well, they're your meatheads too, Ichigo. The scarred man smirked. You're welcome to join my division at any time. He turned to Ikeku. Speaking of which, where's Yachiro? You'd think she'd be here. Ikeku looked nervous, knowing how pissed Zaraki would be when he got the news. Don't worry, Zaraki. She never left you. Ichigo said, making the third and fifth seat look at him strangely. But Captain Anohana said she disappeared right in front of her eyes. Yumi Chika said, before realizing he slipped and clapped his mouth shut. Yeah, but she never left Zaraki. Ichigo defended. She disappeared about the same time he got his Shikai right. Soon the gears started turning in their heads. Kenpeki, focus on what Yachiro looks like and push out your Ryutsu. Kenpeki focused on that and felt a weight appear on his lap. He opened his eyes to see his surrogate daughter, looking the happiest she's ever been. You finally called to me, she said, tears of joy coming from her eyes. I'm so happy. She wrapped her tiny arms around her wielder, holding him tightly. I knew you would. One day you would call out to me. Ichi and Zan kept their promise. Everyone stared at her in shock, except for Ichigo, who manifested his hollow blade. It'd actually be hard for him to break that promise, no Zarashi. Zanjitsu said to the pink head. We both like fighting just as much as Zaraki. We just have more stuff to do. He patted the girl spirit on the head, making her giggle in delight. It was fun battling you. Till next time. He faded back into Ichigo as Yachiro turned back to Kenpeki. Guess you should make Baldy your new lieutenant. I never did the job that well anyway. She said to her wielder. Lieutenant. Ikeku spoke softly, being called Baldy didn't even register to him. It's okay. I'm just happy to be with Kenny. She smiled to Ikeku before turning back to her partner. I'll always be there when you need me. She said with a smile, kissing him on the forehead before disappearing back into his soul. So what now, Zaraki? Ichigo asked, after giving him a moment of silence. I'll handle a different goal in my life. He said, forcing himself up and powering through the aches and stiffness in his body, going out of the room. The rest of the guys looked at each other before following him. They watched him limp to Captain Anohana, giving a lecture to some of the younger members of her squad. When she saw Kenpei, she took on her scary mode. "Captain Zaraki, you really shouldn't be dash," she was saying before Kenpei pulled her in and gave her a deep kiss. Time froze as everyone watched in shock. Anohana looked completely stunned at her successor's actions. After a while he pulled away. "For the longest time of my life, you were the only person I've ever respected," he said, remembering when they first met. When she showed him the joys of fighting. "I wanted to reach that point again. Find that feeling that only you gave to me that one time. I wanted to continue where we left off. Ichigo gave me the most satisfying fight I've ever known in my life, greater than when you and I first met. We still need to settle things between us, but I will never kill you. Instead, marry me and become my wife." Everyone held their breath as silence pervaded the room, all eyes on the two of them. "Okay," Anohana said, still in a state of shock. "Great," Kenpei said, turning on his heel and leaving. "I need to do some work rearranging things at my division. We can make plans for the wedding later. Ichigo, you're my best man." He then left, leaving a still stunned Anohana. "Everyone, back to your rooms. I need to lie down a moment," Anohana said, walking away with her stunned expression. What happened between them? Ichigo asked himself, planning to ask Yamamoto later. After the inevitable meltdown, he returned to his room to find his father, Urahara, Tessai, and Yamamoto in his room. Is this because of the fight? He got unanimous nods. "Alright, what now?" "Ichigo Kurosaki. Your powers must be sealed," Yamamoto said. "I agree. At this rate, I'd never get a decent match," Ichigo said. "No. You don't understand," Yamamoto said. "Your powers must be sealed completely. Check the description for the links to the author."